Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Sorry for the limited participation. We just have a couple of members here today. We are here, today is February 21, 2025. We're here for a work session regarding AM 171-2025, executive appointment confirmation hearing Greg Soule. So we'll start with introductions.
Cameron Perez-Verdillo.
Karen Bronga.
Anna Brawley.
Christopher Constant on the phone. I see Mr. Rivera's just joined us.
Present.
Anyone else on the phone? I'm not hearing anyone else. So welcome, Ms. Lynn Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would say I convey the mayor's regrets on her behalf that she can't be here today in person. That said, I am pleased to be here in her stead to present Greg Soule for a consideration for appointment to the role of Development Services Director for the municipality of Anchorage. Mr. Soule is an outstanding candidate for this role. He is experienced, he's well-respected, and he's immensely knowledgeable. He's been serving as the acting director of the MOA's Development Services Department since May of 2021. So for nearly 4 years, he's been responsible for all building official and director responsibilities in a department that includes 6 divisions, 70 employees, while maintaining also his position as the development manager, directing a staff of engineers and ensuring regulatory compliance and utility coordination. So I'm excited to see what he can do when he only has one job as opposed to multiple jobs in this department. Mr. Soule is a licensed civil engineer who brings more than 26 years of structural, geotechnical, and transportation engineering experience to his role. He earned a civil engineering degree from the University of Colorado at Boulder and his Arctic engineering degree from the University of Alaska, Anchorage. I'd say Mr. Soule has already shown he can successfully lead department initiatives, interpret and enforce building safety codes, and oversee issues of budget, staff, customer service, and personnel while implementing administration priorities. I think this is a particularly hard role. This is a role that a lot of people have opinions about. And I would say it was very notable when we were considering candidates for this role, the wide respect that Mr. Soule has from all of the different constituent groups who have an interest in this role, from the development community, from staff, from leadership. So I am particularly pleased to present him today as candidate for the Development Services Director role. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Soule.
Thank you, Becky, through the chair. I guess I'm very honored and grateful that that the administration has enough confidence in me to offer me the position. I have been acting in this role for just about 3 years, and it's given me a lot of time and perspective to kind of grow into the role and learn all the moving parts of my department. There are, as Becky said, 6 divisions, and each of them have some of their own subdivisions. So it was a lot to learn. I've had it's been very exciting and rewarding to learn all the names and faces and roles and see where we are in terms of productivity and where we could improve. So yeah, I'm excited for accepting the role and seeing how we can improve things.
Start then, Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thank you. And I am also very excited that you are in this role, so thank you for stepping up to that. I know this building official position is hard to fill and hard to keep folks around, so I think it's really important. I guess I have 2 questions. I'll ask one and then I'll yield the floor and come back. So we've passed a lot of policy to improve the ability to build more housing, and we're going to continue to do that. But the way I see it, and it's something that's not in the Assembly's control, is the permitting process. And I know it's not for lack of folks wanting it to be better, but that's always been a challenge, I think, for really streamlining, making it work for folks and and getting out of this dysfunctional cycle where everybody feels frustrated when they walk in that building, because I know that's not good for anybody. So all that to say, I am curious where you see the priorities are for improving that process and kind of what you've thought about or what the department is working on to improve the permitting process. And I say that with housing, but I think it really affects all development projects. So I'm thinking big picture too. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Brawley. Through the chair, I guess I'll push back just a little bit. I wouldn't say everyone who walks through that door is frustrated. I think my staff does a pretty good job ushering people through the process. But you are right, there are a lot of things that can be shored up, and there is a lot of frustration that goes on there. I think one of the main things I hear is, inconsistency in information they get from basically the permit counter folks. And I think that stems largely from, we have a lot of turnover in that position, and it seems like we're always in a state of flux there. Training, bringing people on board, getting them up to speed, and that includes all the way up to the manager position. I've had 3 permit counter managers in the 3 years that I've been in the acting position. So it has been a struggle. So one of the goals I think would be to really incentivize those folks to stick around. So retention, training, consistent messaging, from them when people come in to get permits. Obviously, there's the online permitting, so people don't even have to walk into the building. There was an attempt made at that, which was unsuccessful. So we're going to take another swing at that, hopefully, with some improved software that will allow for more user-friendly online permitting and payment. So people won't even have to come into the building unless they have questions that need answered that they can't get through the online process. Another thing we hear is, over the years, over the evolution of this department, we've written, I think, over 100 policies, procedures, handouts. I think we could do a lot to consolidate those. It's a lot for the average citizen to come in and kind of wade through all the information and see what applies to them. One of the other things that has really come up, especially recently, is I think shoring up the plan review in certain aspects. One of the things that I know frustrates a lot of people is they'll go through the process. They'll have a set of plans, that are approved by the municipality. They go out there and they'll construct. Everything's installed. Inspectors come out and say, "Well, that's not the code. That's not the code," and that's a shortcoming of the plan review process, I think. And so we're looking at doing some more over-the-shoulder type reviews with the inspectors, and particularly electrical and plumbing and mechanical. That's where we see most of those issues. We don't see that in structural very often. So I think, better information and messaging, more consistent, consolidating the handouts, and shoring up the plan review with the help of the inspectors, and just kind of better communication all around. And of course, hopefully getting some good online permitting capability out of our software.
And I'll say too, and I've had this conversation with Mr. Wilbur a while ago too, kind of where, what is the problem? And I think part of it is, I'm glad you mentioned communication, because I think it really is people's expectations when they walk in the door, right? So I'm not coming at this thinking that the problem is inside the building necessarily, right? It's resetting that. So I appreciate that focus of kind of how we improve that relationship. My other question is, because I've really talked with folks about the idea of, how do we reuse older buildings, and to what extent is it a code issue, or, how do we allow, really it's a question of risk tolerance. How do we allow folks to deal with the buildings that we have and that they exist, but also not being unsafe, right? Because we have a history in this community of some unsafe buildings, like the roof truss issue from the 70s. Anyway, all that to say, I'm wondering, when you're looking at your position, how do you anticipate going about balancing the need for flexibility? So waivers, really that discretion piece that I think is not in the purview of the line staff. It needs to be at the building official level, with also the need for consistency, and not just kind of waiving everything, not treating one person differently than the other, right? So kind of as you're thinking about this role, where do you see that balance between that flexibility and, again, consistency and holding the line on safety? Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Brawley, through the chair. The main thing with building safety is safety. So, these codes were written because people died, obviously. So there's a lot of things we just can't waive, honestly. When it comes to things the building official can waive, it's fees, fines, certain things like that. And I guess you started your question off with reuse of existing buildings. So are you talking about the change of use process, I guess?
I guess to clarify just the issue of, when you're renovating a building that is, was built maybe before some of these codes, and then is it, one move is to say you have to bring absolutely everything up to
Okay.
code, right?
Yeah.
But then is that practical? And then to some extent that gets in the way of us being able to practically use the buildings we have. So that's where I'm wondering just that tension between, like again, whole adherence to
Mhm.
best practices in code, but also the reality of what's already built.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. So we don't require, if a building is being renovated, we don't require everything to be brought up to the current code. If something was built to a previous code cycle, that can stay. In the event of a change of use, like if, for instance, if someone's going to convert a fourplex into an assisted living facility where people will need assistance, then in that case, certain things do need to get upgraded. And it can't be waived, fire suppression, accessibility, things like that. So change of uses can get a little stickier, but if it's just renovations we're talking about, we don't require everything to be upgraded. And, we can, there are certain things that we can kind of put the blinders on and say, no, that's not part of this renovation. That can stay as it is.
All right. I have myself in the queue, then Mr. President, then Spranga. And my question is probably for the manager, but you could probably answer it. So we have two labels here. One is development services and one is the building official. And so is it the intent that this is now one kind of role? And just speak to that a little bit, please.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So technically it is a combined role, similar to PM&E. The director is also the municipal engineer. Traffic, the director is also the traffic engineer. These are codified positions: traffic engineer, municipal engineer, building official. So historically, they've combined the director with that codified position.
I would offer a little that there have been some innovative ways to fill that position over the last 6 years. And so I don't know that there's a usual anymore. That's why I'm asking
Yes.
for a little clarity.
And this is actually, I'm glad you asked this question. When I first accepted the acting role, I'm more of a horizontal construction guy, civil engineer. Haven't had my head into the IBC, IRC for quite a few years. So Ross Knopfsinger was there. He was kind of recognized as the building official. It was a struggle to split the position mainly due to HR constraints. They were unable to figure out how to do two acting roles. So we did find a creative way with Lance Wilbur's help to do that. And now we're in the same boat. Ross is now gone, but Daniel King has replaced Ross as the engineering services manager. Daniel is also, just like Ross, he's completely involved in the IRC, IBC. He's, involved in the rewrites and everything. So I rely heavily on him. I'm the one that signs things as a building official. You could say Daniel does the heavy lifting, and that's the way it's working out now. If there was an opportunity to split the two roles up, I wouldn't be opposed to that, or appoint him as like a kind of a perpetual acting building official. I wouldn't be opposed to that either. I think we're talking about HR constraints really in creating a new position. I know Daniel has no interest in taking on an executive role. I don't think that the building official should be an exec role. I think it should remain as a non-rep. I think the Bendon Adams report, if you ever have read through that, that also agrees with me there. It's because when you put a codified position in a role that's essentially political and serves at the pleasure of the mayor, then you could say that kind of truncates their ability to make decisions based strictly on the code, because now they have to factor in politics and whatnot. So yeah, I think that could be an interesting direction to go.
So I just then put a cap on that to say that it would be clearly in the hands of the administration to drive if there is a new structure that is emerging that would be valuable to pursue.
Yeah, to the chair, I think we envisioned this appointment again as a combined role to start, but are open to further conversations about what makes the most sense in terms of the structure, what is best for the municipality going forward. So I think in general, we are always learning and always considering whether there's a better structure that would work going forward. But current appointment is to the dual role of Development Services Director and Building Official.
No, absolutely. And so it's interesting to hear, though, that there's a concept of a permanent acting building official because of the heavy lift, which it's an issue to think through because it doesn't sound square. It sounds fuzzy. Engineers like square, I think. And so, and also I would offer that it's an interesting thing to think that a non-rep is not also subject to a political appointment process of some way. It's a little bit more protected probably, but it's not so protected, I don't think, as we are coming to learn these days. But thank you. It's helpful information to know how you're organizing the building official roles, because we hear a lot about that from the building community, and so they need to know who to turn to.
Thank you, Mr. I'll also add, in the past, my understanding is that the position required a building official certification. I think that requirement was removed at some point because they were having a very difficult time finding someone to fill the role. I know Bob Dole, he was great as a director and really dug into as the building official. He was an attorney, he wasn't an engineer, and he was in similar. I'm also really digging into the codes and actually considering pursuing a building official certification at some point. But right now I'm still doing private development as well, and so it's been tricky to keep up with the IRC and IBC, and particularly with all the changes that are coming at us like crazy from the assembly and from the administration, through the, assembly administration. Lots of code changes, lots of revisions, so.
Yeah, we
Still
don't
have to
hit
keep up
Title
with.
23 too often, but we do sometimes. So that one's harder for us. It's not so square on as Title 21. Okay, so Cameron.
Hi. Just a couple questions. Do you, being now in this role on a not temporary basis, or do you have direction from the mayor at this point in terms of like what, based on her priorities and based on what she's trying to accomplish over the next year, what is your understanding in terms of your direction from the mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through the chair, yeah, her priorities have been made perfectly clear to everyone in our department. 10,000 homes in 10 years, improving customer service at the permit center. I know those are her kind of two main ones for my department. And we're definitely on board with furthering those goals. As I kind of said earlier, this department has evolved over several decades with the plan review, the inspection, all the processes in place. So, to the extent that we can make those changes to further those goals, I think a lot of those changes will happen more at the Title 21 planning level. We're more of like a life safety, building safety issue, concerns in our department. So what we can do is improve the permitting process, improve customer service.
Yeah, I mean, I don't proclaim to know very much about the technical details of what you do, but I can tell you that in my 6 years on the assembly, and even prior to coming on the assembly, that this is the number one thing that folks have talked to me about. And what I'm confused about is, what are we going to do that's different? What are we going to do that past people who've been in your position haven't done? And is this a technical problem? Is it the problem of a particular policy or a code or is there something more going on? Is there a culture within this department? Is there a process that we have been trying to sort of continue to do that we need to change? That's what I'm curious about. I'm curious about and I guess the other question that I have for you is, do you see that this department is, let me just back up and say, my understanding is that the purpose in some ways of the departments that you run are to keep people safe, right? And to ensure that we're doing things in a safe manner and all of those things. Is there a way to do that and not be an impediment to development and growth? is it possible for these departments to actually be more effective and efficient, or is it just the nature of this work? And that's what I guess I'm trying to get to. Is do you see yourself making significant changes that would result in these departments being less of an impediment, but more of a way of actually facilitating growth and facilitating development? Is that possible? And if so, I mean, I know you went through a whole bunch of things you're doing. Is that within your purview to do over the next year, 2 years?
Through the chair, Mr. President, when I hear about barriers to development, largely what I hear is cost, offsite improvement costs. People do complain about the planning fees, permit fees, these kinds of things.
Sure.
Our process in terms of plan review, inspection, project closeout, if you have anything to compare it to, like in Seattle or other cities, if you talk to developers who work in those other cities and then come work with us, our process is actually much shorter to go through. It can take a couple of years to get permits down in those places.
So you don't necessarily see the departments as something that is actually impeding growth and development.
No, I wouldn't say that. I definitely say there are some pain points that can be fixed and shored up. I think. So we also have a revenue versus expenditures issue, and there's a lot of the common thinking was that, hey, if we lower permit fees or waive permit fees, we'll incentivize development. That may be the case. We tried that during COVID. We did the 20% reduction.
Right.
2 years ago, we decided not to adopt the most current ICC fee tables and stayed with the old ones to avoid any increases. Did it work? Yeah, I think probably a little. I think we did see an increase in permitting. But when it comes to like large multifamily development, is the $6,000 or $8,000 permit fee going to stop a $800,000 project? Probably not. I don't think. And we are revenue based, so we're gonna have to find a balance there with lowering permit fees and all that kind of thing. But I do think improving the ease that it is to get a permit, I think that'll incentivize people to come in, and I think new software would go a long way towards that. Right now we have it's very kind of antiquated, and consultants have a difficult time with it, as well as just your average folks coming in to get permits.
And you mentioned customer service, and I certainly don't want to disparage anybody that works for the municipality, because we want all of them to stay and we respect all of them. But that's not the first time I've heard that there may be some, and maybe from past administrations or what that sort of thing, but a customer service challenge. And can you speak to that a little bit in terms of your approach to improving customer service, and whether there is, from your perspective, some sort of internal cultural changes that need to happen or could happen to both improve customer service and also to improve the functioning of your departments?
Thanks, Mr. President. In addition to, like, as I was mentioning to Ms. Brawley about better retention and training in our permit counter folks, because they are really the front lines. I think if we could kind of build a better culture to view ourselves more as facilitators as opposed to regulatory people, like we're here to facilitate. We're all rowing in the same direction. We want to see this development come out of the ground just as much as you do, because it improves our town, it creates economic stimulus, all the good things that go along with development. So, maybe more of kind of a cultural paradigm shift within the department to work with developers a little bit, or not a little bit, just to view ourselves as that's our goal.
Yeah.
I think, in the past, there's always going to be your bad actors, folks that come in and And it's inevitable. I mean, especially when you get to the code enforcement part, these folks don't start dealing with people until problems happen. They catch people without permits, or they're, violating codes, or, skipping inspections, this and that. So there's going to be friction. It's just the nature of the business, right? But from the outset, when someone does come in to get a permit, I think if we have just like a friendlier approach, like, we're here to help you, get this project going. And I do see that a lot in staff, but I think that definitely could be improved.
Great, thanks. And I apologize for the amount of time I'm taking, but the last thing I would just say is that during the transition team, I know that this was one of the top topics, right? And folks like Carol Gore and others that were involved in that, and wanting to change some of this attitude from I'll, here are the things that you can't do to here are the things you can't, right? So I appreciate that. I appreciate the work of trying to sort of continue to create that kind of service mentality. So thank you for your willingness to step into this position, and I certainly will be voting to support you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen.
Thanks very much. First off, I want to thank you. I looked through my email of the number of times you've responded to me, and not only given me the bare minimum, like, hey lady, I don't do that, but a very long description of who I would approach, why this is the approach I need to take. And I'm ever so grateful for the Regal Mountain Gate issue that you helped kind of spur activity on that. And I really thank you for that. It shows that, you are knowledgeable in your job, but you're also willing to share that knowledge. And I do appreciate it. One thing I was thinking when you said facilitator versus regulator, that just sounds fabulous. And I mean, I'm sure this is nothing you could do, but, like for customer service, maybe who clears the most permits in a certain period of time, some contests to, that we are actually working through these permits. Maybe you hit the easy button when a permit clears and you all celebrate. But it is a big deal that we move them forward, and I trust that you are going to be looking at ways to do that. One thing that came up recently, and this may be just a really dumb idea as well as the easy button, but there was a gentleman who emailed me about he's trying to develop a piece of land in Anchorage. He doesn't live in Anchorage. And when he goes to the library, he gets 30 minutes on a computer, and he often doesn't understand how to fill out the forms for the planning department. And he's really frustrated. And I called planning services to see if there might be like a computer for customers available, and they said no. And I thought that's a possible way that, if you're right there trying to fill this out, there's people nearby that could help you out. And, it could be a place for someone to work on some of those complicated documents. But I just was thinking that could be an idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, Ms. Bronga. That's that kind of piggybacks on one of the ideas that's kind of come up recently of a permit concierge, almost like I'm not sure exactly how that would look, because it would be kind of one person who is ushering through several 100,000 permits, and that's a lot of correspondence back and forth and everything. But we do have permit facilitators in town, like Scope and a few others. But for the average, I keep saying average, for like the gentleman you're talking about doesn't live in town, doesn't really understand the process. Someone like him, that could be that would be perfect for someone like that. And to one extent or another, we all kind of function as that now. Someone comes in the building, they don't know exactly how to navigate the process, and it's not easy. I mean, especially when you're talking about between planning and then permitting. And one of the things we're working to do is better define that role, so that someone doesn't have to start at our counter and then go to the planning counter only to have the planning counter send them back, because there's nothing more frustrating. I hear that a lot. You're back in the queue waiting to talk to the same person you were just talking to. So that sort of thing could definitely be shored up. And the permit concierge is an interesting concept that I'm kind of looking at more and more as something that would actually be really beneficial.
I really like that idea. That'd be great.
All right, so we are just over time. I'm gonna take just a couple more minutes. It's not a committee, so a little flexible as long as you're willing. Just a couple more minutes. I think in the discussion about barriers to development and cost is one of them, time is another, and you suggested that time is better here than other places, but it certainly is a consistent thing that we hear from the development community. It's cost, yes, and the cost of time is just tremendous, especially considering the triggers that we have, that if you miss a certain point in time, it's next year, or you're, paying to tent in concrete, and gets very expensive very quickly. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that time is one of those factors. You also mentioned that e-permitting didn't work out, and then you said new software will probably help to do some of this. Was that in reference to a new electronic permitting, or was that an internal software?
Mr. Chair, so currently we have an Infor and E-plans. We have two pieces of software that work in conjunction with each other, and they're very antiquated. They don't communicate with each other. Infor also offered they called it a online permitting portal.
Right.
You might have heard of it, the Rhythm for Civics portal. This was before my time, but they brought in this Rhythm for Civics portal. We spent, I don't know, untold hundreds of man hours trying to implement this, lots of money, and it just was not able to work. We couldn't get it to work for some reason. Couldn't integrate it with our payment systems. People weren't able to get permits through. They kept getting hangups, and it was basically given up on because it's an older software. We've looked at 6 vendors now that have simple online payment softwares that then can also integrate with SAP on the back end so that they can do payment online and whatnot. And also, I know you guys we get constant requests from the assembly and from the administration for data, how many of this, how many of that. So this would enable more nimble reporting too, better functionality in that respect. But the biggest thing is I would like someone to be able to sit at home, upload all of their plans, specifications, permit application, send it in. They don't require an email back, which is what is required now. And then the permit starts getting processed, works its way through the system. They get an email notification if there's any corrections or if their permit's approved, and then they're able to just pay right online. So that's basically new software. We're getting rid of Infor and E-plans and bringing in a new software solution that's it's a one software solution that's also based with it's Bluebeam based. If you're familiar with Bluebeam, it's industry standard now. It's basically like Adobe but on steroids, and plan review and edits and all can happen right there in real time.
Is it an off-the-shelf solution, or is it a customized solution?
Based on the demonstrations we've seen, it's basically off the shelf.
Sweet, that's-
There's going to be a little bit of
that's good
customization
news.
here and there,
Yeah,
but
but that's just modules, not the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then timeline for implementation of the new computer system.
well, that's depending on quite a few factors, whether or not we have to go through the RFP process.
General sense then, like, I'm not gonna ask you to pin it on a map.
Yeah,
but like
thanks.
Within a year, within 6 months, like, what are we talking, a year, 2 years?
Probably 2 years on the outside to be fully up and running, maybe sooner.
Okay, and then last question I have is on the topic of pre-approved building permits. Are you following that project?
Yes, I've been involved in the work sessions.
Yep. And so your team is kind of ready to enter a brave new world at some point in the not too distant future?
Well, we have sent out, we did an RFP with that. I shouldn't say we, it's actually you guys, yeah. And there wasn't any respondents. We had zero respondents on that. So then we've since scaled that down to just ADUs. And we did get one respondent, but we're actually trying to get a few more in to get looked at. So we're just at ADUs at this point. There wasn't a lot of interest from architects into giving us pre-approved plans. I know it's worked in a couple other jurisdictions, but So that's
Yeah,
where we are on that.
It's their business. Okay, I think that answers all my questions. I don't know if there's anyone else. We're a little bit over. Thank you. Your confirmation hearing will be held on Tuesday. I understand that you'll be out of town, so
I will.
when we get to the end of that conversation, the clerk will work with you to finalize that project. And anything last to say?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I hate to miss the confirmation vote, but I appreciate your vote of confidence and looking forward to working with the administration.
Thank you very much, everybody. With that, then we will be adjourned. And I think that's it for the day.